Welcome to another deep dive, this time into Dao De Jing, chapter 18. We've got some really fascinating source material in this chapter, and honestly, I'm a little intimidated, to be honest. You know, Laozi's take on societal virtues, it's pretty counterintuitive. He's like saying, you know, things like kindness and loyalty are like warning signs. Luckily, we have a real expert with us to help us break it all down.
Well, I find this chapter absolutely captivating. Laozi, he's a master of observation, and he's really offering us a unique lens to view both societal and personal evolution.
So we've got, of course, the original text of chapter 18, both in Mandarin and in English. We also have a lecture from Dao Master Chu-Ming Fu, and some analysis comparing Laozi's ideas with, you know, Western philosophical thought. Where do we even begin with something this complex?
Well, it's always best to start at the source, right? Let's hear the text itself, first in Mandarin, then in English, just to really let it sink in.
Okay, here goes. Sava Samin.
And in English. When the great Tao ceased to be observed, benevolence and righteousness came into vogue. Then appeared wisdom and shrewdness, and there ensued great hypocrisy. When harmony no longer prevailed throughout the six kinships, filial sons found their manifestation. When the states and clans fell into disorder, loyal ministers appeared.
Wow. Even without any further explanation, you can just feel the weight of those words. It's so concise, yet it packs in so much depth.
Precisely. And that's what makes it so challenging, right? It's like a Zen koan, a riddle designed to provoke deeper thought.
Thankfully, we have Dao Master Chao's insights to guide us. What stood out to you from his interpretation of chapter 18?
Well, Dao Master Xiao, he really highlights how Laozi isn't offering like a solution here, but rather an astute observation of how societies operate. It's like a commentary on the cyclical nature of human behavior and how we tend to create these really elaborate systems of virtue when our connection to the Tao is weak.
Okay, so Laozi is basically saying, hey, look at these patterns. When these virtues are like loudly proclaimed, it's a sign that things are out of balance.
Yes. It's not that these virtues are like inherently negative. They can be very powerful forces for good. But when they become prominent, almost like a Band-Aid solution, it often points to a deeper disconnect from the Tao.
That's fascinating. So according to Dao Master Cho, what triggers this disconnect in the first place?
Well, he points out that when societies lose sight of the Tao, they tend to swing to extremes, right? It's that pendulum effect. Too much emphasis on individual desires leads to chaos, and then a desperate attempt to restore order through, you know, these rigid social structures.
So these virtues become almost like a knee-jerk reaction to a problem that needs a more fundamental solution.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Think of it like a company that suddenly starts touting its ethical practices after a major scandal, you know?
Yeah.
It might look good on the surface, but it doesn't really address the root cause of the issue.
Okay, that makes sense. And I remember Dao Master Chao brought up some compelling historical examples to illustrate this, right?
Yeah. He talked about how periods of intense conflict often give rise to, you know, like fervent displays of patriotism and the emergence of these heroic figures. It's like those virtues are amplified in response to the instability and the fear, but they might not be sustained once things calm down.
It's almost like people need something to cling to in times of turmoil. So they latch onto these virtues as a way to feel safe and secure.
Exactly. It's a natural human response. But Laozi, he's urging us to look beyond those surface level reactions and ask ourselves, like, what's the underlying cause of this imbalance?
So let's dive into the specifics. Laozi lists several virtues in chapter 18.
Mm-hmm.
Benevolence, righteousness, wisdom, filial piety, compassion, and loyalty. Why would he see these seemingly positive qualities as red flags? This is where my head starts to spin a little bit.
It's definitely a mind-bending concept, especially when you compare it to Western philosophy, where these virtues are often seen as the foundation of a moral society. But remember, Laozi's coming from a very different perspective. He's not saying that these qualities are bad in and of themselves, but he's questioning whether they're arising from a genuine place or if they're being used to mask deeper imbalances.
Okay, so let's unpack these one by one, starting with benevolence and righteousness. Mm-hmm. How does Laozi's view differ from the way these virtues are typically celebrated in Western thought?
Well, in Western philosophy, benevolence and righteousness are often seen as like universal principles, you know, absolute goods that we should all strive for. But Laozi, he sees them as contextual. He's saying that when these virtues become prominent, it's often a sign that people have lost touch with the natural harmony of the Tao. They're relying on external rules and moral codes to try to force a sense of goodness onto a system that's already out of whack.
So it's not that he's against kindness or justice. It's more about the motivation behind those actions. Are they coming from a place of genuine connection and balance, or are they being used to compensate for a lack of inner harmony?
Exactly. Think of it like this. Have you ever felt like you were performing kindness in a relationship, like going through the motions but not really feeling it?
Oh, I think we've all been there at some point. It's exhausting and it never feels quite right.
That's because it's not coming from a genuine place, right? And that's what Laozi is getting at. When these virtues are being performed rather than emanating naturally, it's a sign that something is off.
And he's applying that same logic to society as a whole.
Yes. He's suggesting that when we see a society obsessed with promoting these virtues, it's often a sign that they're trying to cover up deeper societal issues.
So if we're constantly talking about how benevolent and righteous we are, maybe it's time to look inward and ask ourselves, are we truly living in accordance with the Tao, or are we just putting on a show?
That's a powerful question to consider.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we've talked about benevolence and righteousness. What about wisdom? How does Laozi's perspective challenge the typical Western, admiration for intelligence and knowledge?
Well, this is where Laozi's perspective gets really intriguing. He doesn't outright condemn intelligence, but he warns against wisdom that's divorced from the Tao. In fact, he links cleverness to hypocrisy, which seems pretty radical.
Wait, so being smart can actually be a negative thing, according to Laozi. That seems counterintuitive, to say the least.
Well, remember, Laozi is all about, balance and harmony. He sees true wisdom as rooted in aligning with the Tao, not just like accumulating knowledge or outsmarting others. When intelligence is used for selfish gain or manipulation, it becomes a tool for disruption rather than harmony.
So it's not intelligence itself that's the problem, it's how it's being used. Kind of like how nuclear energy can be used to power cities or create weapons.
That's a great analogy. And to illustrate this point, Dao Master Chu brought up the concept of greenwashing. Companies appearing eco-friendly while engaging in unsustainable practices behind the scenes.
So they're using their intelligence to create a facade, not to actually solve the problem. It's wisdom that's ultimately self-serving.
Exactly. It's a perfect example of what Laozi calls great hypocrisy. And this applies to individuals as well. Think about the pressure to appear like wise or enlightened on social media. It can lead to inauthenticity and a focus on appearances over genuine self-cultivation.
It's like we're so busy trying to look wise that we forget to actually embody wisdom in our actions.
Yeah.
So how do we cultivate wisdom authentically, according to Laozi? What would that even look like?
Well, Dao Master Chu, he emphasized that true wisdom for Laozi comes from a place of humility.
Mm-hmm.
It's about recognizing the limits of our own knowledge and being open to learning from all sources, nature, other people, even our mistakes.
It's that beginner's mind, approaching everything with a sense of curiosity and wonder, as if seeing it for the first time.
Yes. It's about letting go of the need to always be right and being open to different perspectives.
That's a great point. It's so easy to get caught up in our own opinions and beliefs, but true wisdom requires us to step outside of those limitations and see the world with fresh eyes.
And to act from a place of understanding rather than ego.
Okay, so we've covered benevolence, righteousness, and wisdom. What about filial piety and compassion? How does Laozi's take on these virtues differ from the way they're traditionally, valued, particularly in Eastern cultures?
This is where Laozi's ideas might seem most shocking, especially considering how deeply filial piety is ingrained in many Eastern cultures. He suggests that the overemphasis on filial piety can actually be a sign of disharmony within the family unit.
That's a bold statement.
Yes.
In many cultures, filial piety is seen as the foundation of a strong family and a stable society. How could Laozi see it as a negative thing?
Well, it all comes back to the Tao and that principle of natural harmony. Laozi, he believes that when families are truly connected, there's no need for forced displays of respect or obedience. Love and compassion, they flow naturally. It's not about fulfilling obligations, but about genuine connection.
So if we're going through the motions, following all the rules of filial piety, but lacking that genuine connection, it's actually a sign that something's off.
Precisely. It's like those holiday gatherings where everyone's putting on a show of family unity, but underneath the surface there's tension and resentment.
It's the classic picture-perfect family that's falling apart behind closed doors.
Exactly. And Laozi is urging us to look beyond those superficial displays and ask ourselves, are we truly honoring our family members by fulfilling obligations, or are we sacrificing genuine connection at the altar of tradition?
So how do we cultivate filial piety and compassion in a way that's aligned with the Tao?
Well, Tao Master Xiao, he offered a beautiful perspective on this. He said that true filial piety is about cherishing our relationships with family members, honoring their individuality and offering support without judgment.
So it's about evolving beyond blind obedience to a place of mutual respect and understanding.
Sure.
It's not about being perfect or always agreeing, but about showing up authentically in those relationships.
And allowing those relationships to change and evolve as we do.
That's a really important point. Family dynamics are complex and constantly shifting. Clinging to rigid roles and expectations can stifle those relationships.
And ultimately, Laozi's message is about recognizing that true harmony comes from within. It's not about forcing ourselves or others to conform to external expectations.
Okay, we've covered benevolence, righteousness, wisdom, filial piety, and compassion. What about loyalty? This one seems particularly relevant in today's world where loyalties are constantly being tested.
Yeah, and this is another area where Laozi's perspective might surprise you. While loyalty is often seen as a virtue, especially in times of crisis, Laozi sees the demand for loyalty as a sign that things are already out of balance.
That's interesting. In the West, loyalty is often associated with patriotism, standing by your country no matter what. How does Laozi view that kind of loyalty?
Well, he suggests that when leaders start demanding loyalty, it's often a sign that they've lost the trust and respect of the people. It becomes a way to control dissent and maintain power, rather than a genuine expression of shared values.
So it's like a desperate attempt to hold things together when they're already falling apart.
Exactly. And this applies to personal relationships as well. Sometimes we cling to relationships or beliefs out of fear or obligation rather than out of genuine connection.
It's that staying in a bad relationship because it's better than being alone scenario.
Yeah. Yes, and Laozi would encourage us to examine those attachments and ask ourselves, is this truly serving me? Or am I holding on out of fear or insecurity?
So true loyalty for Laozi isn't about blind allegiance or following the crowd. It's about aligning ourselves with what feels, authentic and true, even if it means going against the grain.
Exactly. It's about having the courage to stand up for what we believe in, even when it's difficult.
So if we're seeing these demands for loyalty everywhere, in politics, in our social circles, even in our workplaces, maybe that's a sign that it's time to step back and reassess what we truly value and where our true loyalties lie.
That's a powerful insight.
Wow. Okay. We've covered a lot of ground here. We've explored how Laozi views these seemingly these positive virtues as potential indicators of societal and personal imbalance, and it's a lot to process. I'm starting to see the world through a whole new lens now. But what's fascinating to me is that Tao Master Xiao, he believes that Laozi isn't just pointing out the problems here. He's actually offering us a way forward.
Absolutely, and that's what makes chapter 18 so relevant. Even today, I mean, we live in a world that's constantly pushing us to strive for more, to be better, to achieve some external measure of success. But Laozi, he reminds us that true fulfillment, it doesn't come from chasing those external markers. It comes from aligning ourselves with the Tao, with the natural flow of the universe.
So if all of these virtues that we've been talking about are symptoms of losing touch with the Tao, how do we get back on track? What would it look like to live in a way that embodies the Tao in the 21st century?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And I don't think there's like a single easy answer. But Tao Master Xiao, he offers some guidance. He talks about the importance of simplifying our lives.
Right.
Letting go of unnecessary desires and attachments, and cultivating a sense of inner peace that's not dependent on external circumstances.
That sounds a lot like the concept of mindfulness that's become so popular in recent years. Is there a connection there?
Definitely. Mindfulness is all about being present in the moment. without judgment. And I think that's a crucial aspect of aligning ourselves with the Tao. It's about letting go of our worries about the future and regrets about the past, and simply being here, now fully engaged in this moment.
That sounds lovely in theory, but in practice, it's so hard. We're constantly bombarded with, distractions, work deadlines, social media notifications, news headlines. It can feel impossible to disconnect.
It's certainly a challenge, but I think Laozi would encourage us to approach these challenges with a sense of gentle curiosity rather than judgment or frustration.
So instead of beating ourselves up for getting distracted, we can simply observe those distractions, acknowledge them, and then gently redirect our attention back to the present moment.
Exactly. It's about cultivating a sense of awareness, both of our internal state and of the world around us, and remembering that we always have a choice. We can choose to get swept away by the current of distractions, or we can choose to anchor ourselves in the present moment.
That's a powerful reminder.
Yeah.
It's so easy to feel like we're victims of our circumstances, but we always have the power to choose how we respond.
And that choice is where our true freedom lies.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of mindfulness and simplifying our lives.
Yeah.
But how does this relate to those virtues that Laozi is critiquing in chapter 18? How do we express things like kindness and loyalty and wisdom in a way that's aligned with the Tao?
Well, I think it comes down to intention. Are we acting from a place of genuine connection and balance? Or are we trying to force or manipulate a particular outcome? Are we clinging to rigid expectations, or are we allowing things to unfold naturally?
So for example, with benevolence and righteousness, it's not about following a set of rules, but about acting from a place of genuine care and compassion.
Exactly. It's about recognizing our interconnectedness with all beings, and understanding that our actions have ripple effects.
Yeah.
When we act from a place of kindness, it creates a more harmonious environment for everyone.
And with wisdom, it's not about accumulating knowledge or trying to outsmart others. It's about cultivating a sense of humility, being open to learning from all sources and recognizing that we don't have all the answers.
And with filial piety and compassion, it's about moving beyond blind obedience or fulfilling obligations. It's about cultivating genuine connection with our loved ones, honoring their individuality and offering support without judgment.
And with loyalty, it's not about blindly following a leader or a cause. It's about aligning ourselves with what feels true and authentic.
Yeah.
Even if it means standing alone.
Yes, and it's about recognizing that true loyalty is rooted in integrity and respect, not in fear or obligation.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, Laozi isn't saying that we should reject these virtues altogether. It's about expressing them in a way that's balanced and harmonious and aligned with the Tao. It's about cultivating those qualities from within rather than imposing them from the outside.
You got it. It's a subtle but profound shift in perspective.
This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive. We've explored the complexities of Dao De Jing, chapter 18, unpacked Laozi's seemingly paradoxical perspective on societal virtues, and even touched upon how we can apply this ancient wisdom to our modern lives.
And I think the most important takeaway is that this is an ongoing journey. It's not a destination. It's about continuously striving to align ourselves with the Tao, to cultivate inner peace, and to act from a place of genuine connection and authenticity.
So as you move through your day today, consider this. What would it look like to approach your interactions with a bit more mindfulness, a bit more compassion, and a bit more awareness of your own internal state?
Perhaps you could try, letting go of the need to control every outcome, allowing things to unfold naturally, and trusting that the universe has a plan.
And maybe, just maybe, you'll find yourself a little bit closer to that elusive harmony that Laozi speaks of. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.